So this anime opens on a large space fleet, its crews preparing for battle as a red rift opens right in front of it. Then the protagonist emerges through the portal piloting a jet black mecha and seems to effortlessly evade enemy fire, destroying capital ships and cleaving through other giant robots. It's actually pretty well produced, with decent CG ships framed in a way that makes the fleet seem large and imposing. The animation and choreography as the MC tears through his enemies isn't half bad, and he also seems to take sadistic pleasure over crushing his enemies, very much delivering on the evil lord aspect of the show's title. But then we get the majority of this episode led into by his inner monologue about getting revenge. It's here where we're drawn into the backstory, where just an average downtrodden salaryman, much like you, who hates his job and his boss, that's not like me by the way, is ultimately happy because he loves his wife and adorable daughter. However, as the episode progresses, we find his love to be a bit one-sided, as it all comes tumbling down, and the poor bloke is left in debt, dying from overwork and exhaustion in his apartment with nothing left to live for. It is here that he meets the isekai devil, not goddess this time, giving him the good news that he will get to reincarnate in another world themed of his choosing. It's important to point out that it isn't the standard goddess character, since he presents him with the opportunity to go to a historic world, a modern world, even a cowboy world, which, if we were being more accurate to this genre, all of them would just be some generic Western-inspired JRPG setting, complete with distracting floating UI. He of course chooses the sci-fi world, which links us into the intro scenario where our MC, fueled by the hatred of how his past life treated him, is now a vengeful space tyrant mowing down enemies in his edgy teen angst. This first episode is counting on genre familiarity to pull the wool over your eyes in hopes that you don't notice how poorly constructed the MC's motivations are. See, being spurred by revenge is pretty much its own subgenre within isekai fantasies at this point, and while that tends to come with its own tired tropes, it can be a compelling hook and establish a goal within a genre that quite often feels directionless. Let's think about what happened again though. Main character wants revenge on his previous life. His previous life has very particular causes for his downfall, who he swears he wants to get back at. And then he now enacts his revenge by being a cringelord psycho in another world. You sure showed them? And yes, this would then have to be some sort of metaphorical revenge, a sort of I'm taking this out on society as a whole sort of deal, but I just don't buy it, which I will continue to explain by the end of this video. There will be more detail, but at the moment, the man's got two conspirators that are the sole cause for his downfall, to whom he screams out bloody murder against, and to be fair, you can sympathize with how over the top they make these people in ruining his life. It is just so weird that in the very same scene that he's presented all these worlds to go to by Devil Brando, he's not just like, no, are you kidding me? I want to get revenge specifically on those two a-holes who ruined everything. Which, by the way, E-Satan looked to be totally selling him on that to begin with. The whole screw the world thing that wronged me doesn't even map anymore. He ends up in another world, so he's not even getting revenge on the same universe that wronged him. This episode is told to us in medias res, where we go back and forth between sci-fi land and our world to give us the protagonist's origin story. But if the motivation that drives your lead's behaviour would make more sense if he was just simply wronged in the sci-fi land to begin with, then guess what? You've screwed up. Sure, the writing here seems to be following some sort of tried and tested template, but it does not seem to understand what the template was even for. The real sad part though is just how common it is for the transported character's past life to have little to no bearing on the story being told for this genre, and that this show is far from being the worst culprit of this. Speaking of genres, you know when you ask for something and you technically get it, but then you realize you should have been more detailed with your request? Isekai. It translates to slop written by 12-year-olds for 30-year-olds. Yeah, can you believe how efficient the Japanese language is? But nowhere in that genre does it indicate that every show has to take place in some watered-down Western fantasy as told by bargain bin JRPGs. So I have in the past asked that isekai take us somewhere else interesting, like space, and although we got space, I felt like the spirit of what I was asking for actually implied more than just a change of scenery. We still have the familiar cringelord lead, an incoming collection of one-dimensional female characters that will fawn over him despite his repulsive personality. At first I thought it was an interesting move, going for a universe reminiscent of Legend of the Galactic Heroes, where future tech meets historic drama, and our main guy is taking the role of Count, on a specific planet with a more traditional political structure. But then when I stopped giving the show the benefit of the doubt, taking into account the target demographic, I'm convinced they chose to set up with at least 80% of the reason being so that the protagonist can have a main character around, a character type you already get plenty of in the traditional isekais. Okay, I can't finish this off without going into more detail about the main character's backstory itself, because it is overplayed light years past the point where I felt any sympathy, cradling right towards comedy, though what sympathy remains is towards anyone who can take this delivery seriously. Main guy is picked on because he is the nice guy in a cutthroat company where neither his boss or co-workers respect him at all. However, he is willing to put himself through all of that on account that he has a wife and a daughter that he loves very, very much. And because this is not our first rodeo, we're just waiting to see how this aspect of his life goes wrong. Maybe an accident happens, perhaps the work situation gets worse, or he gets fired, which puts further strain on his family. NTR! Actually the less common route in this scenario, as it does mean that there will be some explaining to do, but admittedly I was curious to see how this was all going to come together. Main guy actually stays off any confrontation, even past the point where he also catches his daughter referring to the interloper as Papa. And it is at this point where the plot decides to hurry it up with a convenient little nondescript accident. Major enough to require a blood transfusion, but minor enough so that the daughter can be seemingly discharged soon enough to bear witness to a domestic argument. See, main guy looks up online how blood types between parents and offspring work, and I am just going to assume it's reasonable science enough for him to finally conclude that she's not his. At first, the interesting thing to me is how this scene plays out, as it first opens up the possibility that there's a bit more nuance to the events we've been seeing so far, given that they are entirely from the main dude's perspective. First of all, his wife does not even confirm or deny that the daughter is his, but then throws back an understandable set of accusations at him. That despite saying the job is for the family, it's thankless with few prospects. That it has left her to have to raise the child practically alone, and their savings nowhere near being enough to provide her with the best shot in life. She does basically admit to the affair though, while still throwing shade about how he has left her high and dry probably in both senses of the word for 10 plus years, despite promising her happiness at marriage. And that there is the case put forward towards our lead that adds a bit more dimension to his backstory. While ultimately I would not condone cheating, providing additional whys to this scenario goes a long way in communicating that every issue between people does have multiple perspectives, and that you don't have to cast one party as 100% evil in order for us to side with the protagonist. This might sound like I'm changing my tune on what is a negative video on this anime, but yes, if they for example just went with this scenario to showing a steady decline at his work now that his support structure has been upended, which will further spiral him down into not just being embittered at his ex but society as a whole as he drops down to a lower rung despite his best efforts, then his new perspective and his new life would be more justified or at least understandable. Don't get me wrong, I'd still have zero interest in continuing from there, but at least I would not have made this video. Right, that's enough setup. The following revelations are revealed after our MC is accused of and fired over embezzling funds, which his wife also uses as a means to file a divorce with full custody, and also leads him having to pay child support on top of his already crippling debt to his previous employer. He now is forced into back-breaking labor that ultimately is working him into an early grave. Main guy is still also under the impression that the daughter isn't his, but remains hopeful that if he works hard enough, he'll be able to see her again anyways. Well, the truth is revealed to him via some visions from Isekai Satan, and it is the dumbest set of confirmations that either cheapen or outright ruin the positive things I had to say about the story these last few paragraphs. First off, 100% confirmed daughter isn't his, and while this wouldn't seem to change much at first, given that this was bordering on highly likely to begin with, but it already weakens what the wife was impugning on the MC. You see, he never was leaving his wife to solely raise their daughter at most. She's guilt-tripping him for not doing enough to help him bring up someone else's, which on the face of it already sounds like an unreasonable demand. On top of that, she chastised him for allowing this cycle of neglect for his family life to go on for 10 plus years. And while I could not find any confirmation as to the daughter's age in this episode or the wiki page that covers the events of the light novel, my estimation places her somewhere between the 7 to 9-year-old range. Still, however you want to place it, my reason for bringing this up is that although the wife makes the main guy look bad for the non-specific 10 plus years they've been married, the truth is that she's likely been having an affair for around half of that time, possibly more when you consider she could have been cheating on him well before having the daughter. But hey, that's just removing a bit of complexity from the spat by making the wife more clearly in the wrong here. Functionally, it's still sound. After all, many a person can perform terrible acts and still manage to frame the situation in a way that puts them in the right. Worse still, they might actually believe it. But not being satisfied with simply staying mid and instead opting to plummet to the colloquial understanding of the word, the story just can't hold its tongue with the less than stellar reveals. See, turns out the subject of the affair and real father this whole time was in fact his boss. That did seem to run a cruel ship at work, but was particularly cruel to him. Much like what I said about the daughter confirmation, this further ruins any balanced standing the wife's argument had. Her being in cahoots with the boss, which is confirmed by the end of this episode, means that any point she might have had about the main guy stagnating at his job with little hope of progression or significant bonuses means even less when, from this reveal, the game was rigged from the start. From here, other cracks start to form. Until the confrontation with his spouse, the boss was the sole cause of stress in his life, working him so badly that he was even forced to work in the weekends. Even putting aside that it would be perfectly natural to at least try to get a look at the man you suspect your wife is cheating on you with, the fact that he doesn't suspect his boss when he looks and dresses exactly the same as he does in the office is quite baffling. On top of this, it of course had to be the very same boss who framed him for embezzlement, all the while wearing a nice sadistic smile so that we're sure that he has no soul whatsoever. It was at this point that my final benefit of the doubt for this being a competently told backstory was truly extinguished. Want one more line, just one more atom bomb to drop on that dead horse that the wife is simply evil beyond all reason? Well, forget her having that affair on the chance that she genuinely felt neglected by our main guy, or simply fell in love with someone else. No. She wanted to have the daughter with someone else because she was seeking superior genes. What even is this at this point? So she now borders on the similar moral spectrum of a villain that wouldn't be out of place in a Resident Evil game. It is this level of going so beyond the pale in trying to present a sympathetic backstory that I was left more stunned than anything by the end. It would genuinely be hard to believe someone at face value if they told you this is what happened to them and that they weren't embellishing any of it. The kind of melodramatic sob story somebody who wants to take zero responsibility for the misfortune in their life would cook up. But they're just so dang focused on being the victim that they forgot to tone down just how cartoonishly evil they painted everyone else. And in closing, given that the main guy's fall from, well, I'm not gonna say grace, fall from mediocrity was orchestrated by two very specific and close to him individuals in life, you can further believe him when he says he wants to get revenge on them. And understand my point earlier that he most certainly would not settle for this revenge being in some metaphorical manner in another world. All that was to say, well, more or less confirm that this is the standard crappy fanfic writing fare that I've come to expect from the isekai genre, just wearing the skin suit of something different. A more novel and scarcely explored concept at this point would be if the next time some protagonist meets an untimely end only to be transported to another world, that his or her life pre and post demise is not so stupidly written. Thank you for listening.